And employment levels, you understand, always lag behind GDP growth. The economy turns around first, and then employers, when they start seeing things beginning to improve, employers first quit laying people off, and the next thing they do is begin to increase the hours of the people that they had reduced hours on. And then the next thing they do is they begin to hire some temp workers. And then the next thing that they do is they begin to work their existing workers, pay them a little bit of overtime and get a few extra hours. So we begin to see an increase in the average hours per week. And then after all that, they begin to hire again for permanent, long-term employees. And so it's always a bit of a lag. And the projection, this is early 2008, we're looking at probably into 2012 before we would begin to return to 2008 employment levels. And that's sort of the main forecast. There's always an optimistic forecast, but even that optimistic forecast has us in late 2011 before we return to our previous high level of employment. And the pessimistic forecast, well, that's assigned right now a fairly low probability of occurring, but it's still a possibility, puts us at about 2015 before we return to our 2007 level of employment nationally. In all this, Minnesota is in terms of the job growth, is tracking mostly with the United States. Our unemployment rate is substantially below the national average, but we tend to track fairly closely with that job growth. That big. Every quarter from the 30s on, there was at least some growth, even during recession times, at least some growth in total wage and salary disbursements. Some of you have heard about the double dip recession of the 80s. That was dip 1, dip 2. Even in the deepest recession that we had experienced up to this point, in the post-World War II period, at this time, a very significant recession, we still experienced 3% growth in total wage and salary disbursements. 3% growth. And that continued all the way until early in 2002 as a direct result of the 9/11 attack. In early 2002, we had a little blip down. One quarter blip down just a little bit. That was the only case in which we had negative growth since the Great Depression in total wage and salary disbursements. And then we get to this recession, and we have already experienced 4 significant quarters of negative total wage and salary disbursements. We may have another quarter where there's a little bit of a blip down, and then when we recover from this, when we begin to move back up, the growth is going to be relatively modest, and the slope out of this recession is going to be very gradual, and it's going to be basically about another year and a half or so before we return to the gross domestic product level that we had in the late